there's different ways to release a golf club, and that's why a lot of you watching a bunch of different YouTube videos are often confused, because one guy says one thing and another guy says another thing.
I'm
right?
guilty of that, yep.
Yep. And so, but they kind of have to match up. So I have a lot of players that are slicers that I give lessons to, and man, they have, after impact, man, they've got the club like this after they've hit the ball, and that should be like dead closed, but their ball still slices because the ball's already gone. They've hit it with an open face, and it's almost like a fake release that they know it's going right, and after impact they go like this as hard as
It's like
they
they're trying to draw the ball after
yes,
it's gone.
after it's already gone in midair, hoping they have a string on it or something, you know. And so, there are different release patterns in golf, and in the old days, when I was young, almost every instructor taught you to be toe up on the backswing halfway back and then toe up on the way through. You'll still see some of the older tour players that do that. Phil Mickelson's a great example, that his swing is still like that. But it's also one of the reasons why he really isn't historically one of the most accurate drivers, you know, either blocks them or hooks them, because that timing's very difficult. And so for players that have a lot of rotation on the way back, well, they have to have a lot of rotation on this side. And then the modern golf swing, if there's such a thing, has very little forearm rotation, but more body rotation back and through. And as long as I match that up, very little rotation back, very little rotation through, with my forearms and hands I'm talking about, that's a pretty effective way to swing a golf club. Everything stays right in front of you pretty good. It's a pretty powerful and a pretty consistent way to do it. But you can't mix and match, and that's what happens to most players. So here we go, boy. Everybody tells you to swing more left these days. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you see that everywhere on the internet.
Hundreds of videos will tell you to swing left, but if you've got rotation on the way back in your backswing and you swing left, you're in big trouble, or there's people over here on the right of you are really in big trouble. And so it's got to match up. So if I have rotation back, I have to have rotation very early on the downswing before I get to the ball to match up with it. And then if I have no rotation back on my backswing, but rotation on the way down, I'm going to hit tops or hooks very easily. So that's what's important about learning to release correctly, is you have to know what your kind of personality is as a swinger, what your backswing's like. And so I prefer, if I had a preferred way to do it, you know, I've shown this drill a lot with my bottom hand here across the club, and all I do is turn. Boy, I really like most players to have that feeling on the way back with not much rotation, and the club staying in front of their chest very much more so than this way where it gets behind them. But, you know, some players just can't stop this motion. Can you still play golf if you have this motion? Yes, you can, but you've just got to really feel it release before you get to the ball on the way down.
And that timing can probably be really difficult.
Yeah, and especially because the clubs are different lengths, the timing's not the same with every club. And that's why the more it stays in front of you, the more the timing is the same with every club. And that's why it's really a preferred way to move a golf club, in my opinion, is to have more body rotation than arm rotation. But can you do it either way? For those of you that have done this all your life and can't quit doing it, I mean, there's ways to learn to release it on the way down where you can still be a good player. So halfway back, parallel to the ground, parallel to the target line, I like the club face to match your spine angle. Then as his hands hinge up here at the top, I like the face to look like this at the top.
Okay.
And that way the toe is still lined up with the shaft.
Okay.
So it would be open if the toe was over here on this side, and it would be closed if the toe was
And
on
that's
that
if I
side.
try. If I try to get this, that's where I get that extreme
That's right.
bowed feeling from
Bowed.
me
That's
because
right.
I have a stronger
Because
grip.
you have a strong grip. That's right. And so that would be a square position. Same thing, then we'd strike it. If I stop right here and I still have a side bend, that should match my spine angle, right? And then as my hands hinge again, then this toe and this shaft should line up over here and I'm still square.
Okay. And I think sometimes as I come through, I'm more
over that
even
way.
more over this way.
Yes,
Yep, in
I
some of
agree
my
with that.
video. So, which we talked about is probably because I'm a lifelong flipper trying to stop doing that, and so
Right.
I learned to rotate a lot to
Right.
square it because I'm too late squaring early.
Correct. Okay. And so that's what I would tell everybody is to understand the different releases, you know, that there's a couple ways of doing it, and then figure out what your method, what your habit is on your backswing, and it'll help determine what you need to do on the downswing and the follow through.
And if you do have, let's say you're working with a blank canvas, someone who's a newer golfer, and you're teaching them how to release for the first time, maybe. What way do you like to like? What do you think is the optimal way? You want to feel more like you're throwing the club down there with, or less rolling of the wrists? Like, what do you think makes for a better golfer in the long term?
In the long term, I still think, especially if I can tell they're a pretty good athlete, I would like, with the modern clubs, lighter weight and all that, I would still like them to feel from here to here that there's not much rotation with the arms or the forearms, and the club stays in front of them more. That'd be how I would prefer for them to learn to play. But if I can tell maybe they're not a great athlete or they're not very physically strong, okay? It could be a junior, could be a lady, could be a guy. I mean, if they're just, you can tell they're just not have much hand strength and forearm strength, you know, they're probably, to generate club head speed, are gonna have to feel more of a rotation back and through with their arms and their forearms.
Because that is a speed adder when you're
It
rotating.
is.
It's adding a
It
little
is.
bit of extra speed. So.
Yeah, it is. It can. So, and speed's important. And so, so I kind of look at the individual based on what I think they need. We did a short there a couple weeks ago that's done pretty good, where it shows me making a throwing motion with a rope. And so I have very new players, especially if they're pretty good athletes, I love them to make a sidearm underhand throwing motion with their, you know, with their right arm if they're a right-handed player, and feeling that motion. And as I do that, I mean, you'll see how much my hand flips over down here at the bottom. The head of the club just does it automatically, and you can feel that. And with a lot of beginners, I think what causes them to slice is they're holding on to the club too tightly and they have too much grip pressure.
The wrists can't.
And they have, they're not supple enough to release the club. And especially with men, and especially big, strong men, construction worker guys and weightlifters and all that, I see that a lot. With them, I have them try to hold with just the thumb and the forefingers and take these three fingers off. And you can see as I swing the club back and forth how much my hands just naturally flip over. It's really just the weight of the club head down here at the bottom causing that to happen with the motion. And gosh, I can remember probably back when I met you 30 years ago almost, you know, that I used to show this to a lot of people, and I would tell them, boy, my swing, it doesn't feel any different to me when I swing with holding with just the thumb and my forefinger as it does when I have my normal grip. I mean, that's how relaxed I am.
So your normal grip, do you feel like you're having your pressure in those just the same types of things? Like, do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do. It's a great question. And another tangent off on this video, but I'll talk about it because I think it's pretty important. So Ben Hogan's book, which was kind of maybe the Bible for most golf instructors in the 70s and the 80s, his book talked about, with the left hand for a right-handed player, the top hand, feeling the pressure in these three fingers very firmly, and then with these middle two fingers with the bottom hand. And that's what he preached in his book. And so what's interesting about it, see, I always tell people, you have to be careful when a tour player or a really good player writes a book, because they're telling you what they've learned, and I don't discount that it's not great information, but you have to understand what their mistake was. So Hogan was a hooker. When he was young, he really couldn't play. The reason there's a Korn Ferry Tour today is because there was a Hogan Tour back, gosh, I guess in the early 90s, mid-90s anyway. Hogan was the one that put his company name and sponsored that developmental tour, because Hogan knew that when he was a young player, he wasn't good enough to play on the tour if it would have been like today with as many competitive players. He was able to because there weren't that many people that traveled around the country and played professional golf, so he could learn to get better while he was playing. But he was the one reason why we have this tour. But he was a hooker. So his book, in my opinion, is how not to hit a hook, not how not to hit a slice. Yeah. And so what he did with his hands, what he did with his wrist hinged, with having a very cupped left hand at the top, was really an anti-hook swing. And so for players that tend to hit hooks, I tell them to hold on with the last three fingers of this hand more firmly. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
But for players that hit slices, I think that's a mistake. I think I want all your fingers on the club equally, probably. Other than, I think, this thumb and pincher finger, you ought to feel more pressure there. And like I said, do this drill, and you will feel how much that centrifugal force of the club flips your hands over as it swings. And I think that's a really important point to make.
So what about the feeling people talk about, like you're throwing your club down the range? Do you like that type of a feeling, or what do you think about that?
Well, I do. I'm remiss that I can't remember the gentleman's name. I've seen him in a couple of teaching summits and a seminar or two over the years, but he actually teaches people to play golf by throwing clubs. He has a whole great big bag, and they literally he has them throw a club at a target 100 yards away. Almost everybody that does it for the first time, when they try to throw the club, say at the white flag out here on the range out here in front of me, almost always throw it behind them, way to the left.
Because they don't let go. Yeah.
Because they're releasing late.
Yeah.
Is kind of what you're talking
exactly,
about.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. And you're not releasing early enough back here to feel that it throws out down the range. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And so it's a very effective presentation. I'm sure somewhere there's a YouTube video of this gentleman. He was quite a guy. I really enjoyed watching him and listening to him. And I'm sure there's a YouTube video out there of him teaching this way and throwing clubs. But do I think it works? Yeah, I think the golf swing, I do think the golf swing is a throwing motion, not a hitting motion. And I do think the kinematic sequence of how your weight transfer moves and timing and tempo and all that, I think the golf swing is a throwing motion. And so yes, can you learn from throwing clubs? Yes. Do I have students do that? No, because we're so busy out here at Old Hickory, somebody get hurt.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Sure, that
Yes.
makes sense. Yeah.
And so, no, I don't do it. And the other thing is, for my students, I probably wouldn't ever do that myself, even though I could see the benefit of it. And one of my rules is, as an instructor, is I never have a student do anything I wouldn't do myself.
Sure.
So
That's probably a good rule.
So I think that's a great rule. Every instructor should have that rule. And that way you don't have guys doing goofy drills, you know what I mean, where you look like an idiot. So, but yes, I do think that throwing a club motion is a pretty interesting concept, yes.
Cool.